Making a new thing. We all love new things. At least I know I do. Whether that be something shiny and new, like some of us buy new cars. I've done that. And the one thing that I love about new cars is new car smell. But I also know that if you cannot afford to buy a new car, you can also get new car smell at the auto parts store and just put it in your car. I remember growing up, my parents bought me a new bicycle. Shiny and new. It was wonderful. It made me feel good inside. When we get a gift, whether that be a small gift or for those of you that perhaps got engaged whenever that was and got an engagement ring that was so shiny and new and it felt new. And not only that, but there was a new chapter marked by that engagement ring. Making a new thing. One of the things that I marvel about in California is the fact that there are certain places in California that look like it is a desert year-round. And yet, in the midst of our spring rain, something miraculous happens. And it is this, if I can turn on my... There we go. The deserts shall bloom, and the deserts shall be made new. So often when we think of desert, we think of dryness. We think in some cases if you're stuck in the desert, it means certain death. This metaphor of desert is something that is really prevalent in our Holy Scriptures. We not only see the element and the geographical idea of the desert in places like when Jesus was in the wilderness or when Moses wandered in the desert, in the wilderness with his people for 40 years. But it is this metaphor of emptiness, this metaphor of being dry, this metaphor of being simply devoid of anything to hope for is also that desert experience. And our Holy Scriptures are full of it. I've talked and I've prayed and I've preached about Abraham and Abraham's people and how Abraham was that wandering Aramean, wandering through the desert, trying to find meaning for himself and his people. We have the story of Moses being released from bondage in Israel along with his people, only to spend 40 years wandering through the desert, wandering through the wilderness. Our biblical stories go on. We see King David, who seemingly had everything in his life, experienced those desert experiences. Whether it be being confronted with such things as stealing another person's wife or other things that have happened in King David's life, he experienced those desert experiences. And then there was somebody like the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul, who proclaimed himself as the persecutor of Christians. And seemingly in that life, that previous life before he found Jesus Christ, Paul was walking through the desert. And when he had that conversion experience, things opened up for him. And he became the Apostle Paul, that committed follower of Jesus. But yet even Paul, after his conversion, had those experiences of being in the desert, being in the wilderness of life. And I've talked about some of those throughout this series and in other places. The reality is, dear friends, that we all experience those times of dryness, those times of being parched, those times of experiencing being out in the desert of life. But there is another reality. And that other reality is that we all experience resurrection. We all experience resurrection in one form or another. Some of us may have had a critical illness, and coming out of that illness, we have been restored or resurrected to wholeness again. Others of us walk through mental illness or depression, and we walk out of that and we walk into a new light, and we experience restoration and wholeness and resurrection. Some of us have had issues in our family where there's been division in our family and families have been broken. And then all of a sudden, through some way, somehow, our families come back together and we experience resurrection, restoration, hope, and love. The reality is that if we are to be the people of faith that God has called us to be, then we must be resurrection people. And in these next few weeks, we will be experiencing resurrection in so many different ways, but we will be experiencing resurrection through that resurrection of Jesus on that day long ago in Jerusalem. There are so many stories of resurrection that I've come across in my life over the years. I can remember many parishioners throughout the years that I've served that have had resurrection stories. I'll never forget the time when I was serving in my very first church. There was a couple that came in, and it was on a communion Sunday. And on that communion Sunday, they were new to my church, and they were new to the community, and they did not know about Methodist churches and our use of grape juice instead of wine when we serve communion. And for these people, that was very important because both of them were in recovery from alcoholism. And later on, when I was able to talk to them, they shared their stories, and they shared their stories about how they walked through those times in their lives when it was seemingly empty. And in their lives, to fill up that emptiness, they found this gift that they thought of, this demented gift of alcohol that would take away all their worries. And as they walked through that desert experience of being in addiction, they found that they hit a place which a lot of alcoholics and a lot of people who are addicted call rock bottom. And it was from that experience of being in that rock bottom place, that desert experience in their lives, that they told me that they knew that they needed to find a different way of life. And so they shared with me that they got into AA, which a lot of people do, and it turned their life around. And it not only gave them hope, but it gave them a new sense of what faith could be in their lives. Through their experiences in their 12-step program, they essentially rebuilt their lives. We all go through those times in our lives when we hit those desert experiences, but our lives come out of that. And there is always resurrection. There is always hope. And there is always a place where we know that we can be accepted. And we know that there is love. And so as we travel on to these last few weeks, culminating in Easter, let us remember that we can be and will be in those desert experiences in our life. But in the end, we always come out on the other side in a place of resurrection, in a place of hope, in a place of love, in a place where we experience the grace of God as we experience it through Jesus Christ. That is our hope this day and every day.